Hi, welcome to this week's Dragonblade Authors Unplugged. I'm so excited we get to talk to Jenny Worstall, Brenna Ash, and Carol Coventry this week. Ladies, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So Anne Harrington also had a release this week, The Duke of Deceit, which is book 2 in the Dukes of Darkness. She was unable to join us, but we'll make sure we catch up with her in a future time. And I'll make sure I pop the link to that book in the comments along with the other ones. But in the meantime, let's start at the beginning of the week with Carol's book, which is Holding On to Love, which is book 2 in the Taverstons of Iversley. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Yay.
Yep.
Yay. Can you tell us about this one?
So this is book 2 in the series, and it's a series that follows the courtships of 4 Taverston siblings, 3 brothers and 1 sister. And this one is Jasper's story. He's the eldest, and now he's the newly ascended Earl of Iversley. While his father was on his deathbed in the last book and overlapping with this book, Jasper panicked because he knows that his main duty is to marry and set up his nursery and continue the Taverston line. And Jasper always does the correct, dutiful thing. But he makes a mistake and he impetuously starts pursuing a duke's daughter. And before he does that, he does not tell his mistress that he's going to have to put her aside. So if you've read book 1, which was Counting on Love, you know how that's going to work out. The mistress is Mrs. Vanessa Wardrip, and she's a war widow who had once followed the drum, which means that she went to the peninsula with her husband during the Napoleonic Wars, and she was with him until he was killed in battle.
Like a camp follower.
Right, yeah. She's a strong, intelligent woman, no nonsense, but she's deeply in love with Jasper. And she knows that she can't marry, or that he can't marry her because 1, she's a commoner, and 2, she was his mistress. But she made him promise her one thing as the relationship began, and that was that when it was time for him to start courting his countess, that he would tell her first and allow her to bow out gracefully. And Jasper doesn't keep that promise. And she is publicly
humiliated.
So yeah, so she's humiliated. Yeah, the one thing that she wanted him to do, and he fails. So she buys a cottage out in the country, out in the Lake District, and disappears. Doesn't tell anyone where she's going, and starts to make a new life for herself. And so the story is told in 2 time frames, and the first shows Jasper and Vanessa kind of in the aftermath of this, trying to make new lives for themselves without each other. And to some extent, they succeed, but they're both miserable because they are still yearning for each other. Mm-hmm. The second time frame is 4 years earlier, and that shows how their relationship began. It shows how they met, how they overcame some significant obstacles in order to be together, and how they fell in love. So by seeing their backstory, we know that they're meant to be together, and the whole plot of the current story is how Jasper is going to be able to win her back after screwing up so badly.
Yeah, because he did that's was one one request that was not even a hard request, and I feel like he's gonna have. I feel like there needs to be a grovel. Like it feels like.
He's gonna grovel once he finds her. First, he has to find her, and then he can grovel.
Very cool, and it'll be interesting to see how they end up together too, because I don't imagine that any of the situation that kept them apart to begin with has changed. She's certainly not a commoner, so.
Right. Yeah, the same problems are still there. They just have to accept the fact that they'll both have to make some sacrifices and kind of work around that.
Yeah. Very cool. It'll be fun to see how that unfolds. And so then the next book is the other sister, is that right?
The third book is the sister, the youngest sister. And that one is a kind of a straightforward in love with a commoner, in the clash of the classes. Yeah. So, and also a falling in love with a brother's close friend. So,
I love a good brother's best friend story.
2 of my favorite tropes mixed together in that one.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that sounds like so much fun. I'm looking forward to both of them. So, the next book that came out is Anna's book, and then after that, it was Brenna's book, which is Nobody's Rogue, which is book 4 in the Rogues of Redemption series. Brenna, can you tell us about that one?
Sure. So as you said, this is a fourth book in the Rogues of Redemption series, which follows 5 friends that have returned from the Peninsula War. They served together. And this one follows Malcolm, who's the Earl of Cassilis, and he did reconnaissance during the war. So he found that very thrilling and exciting, although he did end up facing a traitor that was very close to him that wounded him very bad. So it hurt him. He had full trust in this person, and that was deceived, and that kind of, soured him on future relationships. And so once he got home, everything's running fine. His estate's going well. He's just bored. He was like, it was very exciting. And now he's just kind of, everything's running smoothly and there's nothing. So going around Scotland, there's been a thief that has been hitting the different houses of society while they're having parties and stealing a piece of jewelry or something that's close to them. And he has a friend that's having a house party, and this friend hires Malcolm to run reconnaissance on the party to make sure that the thief doesn't hit. And unfortunately, the thief does hit, and Malcolm's there, and Malcolm catches her, which nobody expected it to be a her. And he catches her with red-handed. Her hands are in the chest of jewels in the Viscountess's bedchambers, and she's trying to deny that she's the prowler, that it's not her, and that's our heroine, Annabelle Lizzie Barkley. And she's trying to explain to Malcolm that it's not her. She's just figured out who the thief was, and that she's just trying to recover jewels that were stolen from her family. And the jewels belong to her grandmother, and she was very close to her grandmother, and her grandmother's passed now. So when those jewels were taken, it really struck a chord with her. So she spent all her time uncovering who the thief was. And then she finally figured it out and had her chance when her parents had been invited to a party at the Wilson's house, and they couldn't make it. So Lizzie stole the invitation and traveled down with her maid to attend the party without her parents' knowledge and recover the jewels. And she thought her plan was great. She would just go. Her parents would never know. She lied. She said she was visiting a friend. She'll recover the jewels, and then she'll be home in no time, and she'll have the family jewelry. Well, Malcolm was there. He caught her, and the only way she could get him to even try to believe that she wasn't the thief was to convince him to follow her home so she could prove to him that the jewels were theirs by a portrait that was on the wall that shows her grandmother wearing the jewels. Against his better judgment, he decides to do that. So it's an enemies to lovers, a forced proximity. It's fun. They meet, they meet some bad people along the way home to Stonehaven. In the end, obviously she does prove that she wasn't the thief, but Malcolm finds himself in a situation that he never expected, and his life was no longer monotonous, right? It was filled with excitement he didn't see, and then there was a big turn once he did arrive at Lizzie's family estate and found out the truth of a secret that he had been holding. And it was a shock to him and unexpected. And that caused quite a bit of conflict for him and Lizzie and put their future plans into jeopardy. So it's a little fun romp along the countryside. So I enjoyed it. It was a fun book to write. I really liked Malcolm and Lizzie's characters.
So we get an extra secret and an extra jewel thief at the same time too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Is it the last book in the series, or are there more after this one?
There's one more. There's the fifth friend, Gunn, that's left, and his book is due to come out early next year. So.
Oh, great. Great.
Yes.
Something to look forward to.
Yes,
Awesome.
and that will close out the series. So that'll be the end of the Rogues of Redemption for now.
Very cool. Well, the last book that releases this week is Jenny's book, and it's starting again, and it's book 3 in the Heart of Bath series. Can you tell us about that one?
Yes, so this is the final book in the Heart of Bath, and it's set in Bath, which is my home city in the southwest of England. I don't live there now, I live in London, but that's where I was brought up. And I think where you were brought up has a great effect on you. And right from an early age, I really wanted to write a historical novel set in that city, because the city is the same as it always was. Anyway, the Templeton family live in number 1, Royal Crescent, which is actually a museum. It's a living museum. You can go around it. It's also the Featherington House in Bridgerton. So I was probably just too lazy to make up a house. So I just visited this house a lot. That's where the Templetons live. So the first book was one of the sons and his adventures. The second book was the daughter, Selina, and her romantic adventures and so on. And this is the third book. And like Carol, my character is the heir. He's going to inherit everything. And he's actually having a lot of pressure put on him that he should marry. It's time he should marry. He's 25. He's been just doing what Regency gentlemen did. Just
it sounds like not a lot of anything good.
I know it hasn't. They just didn't really do anything much. They rode horses. They played cards. They womanized. They went to all-night parties. They scarcely even saw the daylight. I mean, he's quite immature, and in many ways. He's not particularly likable at the beginning, but obviously he's going to go on a journey and become a better person. And so for his partner, I didn't want him just to fall in love with some young girl. I thought that would be wrong, because he was a little bit older, a bit more experienced. So I have a young widow who moves into number 4, the Royal Crescent. She moves in with her aunt, Lady Barrington. And she was widowed. Her husband was killed at the Battle of Waterloo, as so many were. And she had a double loss, because after she was bereaved, after she heard the news, she also lost her unborn child.
Oh.
So she's really been through things. So she is very mature. She's suffered. But she also does not want to get married, but for a different reason, because to her, she really loved her first husband, but it brought her nothing but heartache. And she literally can't face anything like that again. She just, her heart is broken and it's in a million pieces, and she thinks she'll never be able to put it together. She doesn't want to have a family, because the only child she wants is the one she can't have. So she's quite damaged. And they meet on the Royal Crescent lawn on 12th night, which is the last day of Christmas. They always have a special 12th night party in Bath. And she meets him the morning after that. She went to bed at a reasonable time because she was staying with her aunt. But of course, he's coming home across the lawn, still wearing his evening dress, with his silk evening clothes and his fine leather shoes. She's not impressed. She doesn't think much of him. And yet there's an attraction straight away. And it becomes apparent that all their friends and family think they'd just be a perfect match. She comes from a good family that's somewhat impoverished, but she's a good match for him. She'd be a wonderful hostess and so on, and she's a worthy person to take over as Lady Templeton in time. And for her family, they would be thrilled if she'd marry Edmund, because he's going to be Lord Templeton, and it will be a lot of kudos to them and so on. But of course, Marianne and Edmund do not want to get married. So there's a bit of a misunderstanding. And then they sort of like each other as friends, but they don't like the pressure everyone's putting on them. Everyone's putting them in the same place, go to the pump room together, go to this ball and so on, throwing them together. And then they suddenly realize that this is ideal because they can have a pact between them that they will pretend to be interested in each other, and it will stop all the comments and stop the pressure from family and friends. So they're friends, but everyone else thinks they're going to get married. But for them, they keep pushing, it's going to be a way off in the future. But then, of course, they fall for each other, but they're not going to admit it to each other because they don't want to lose face, because each has told the other, I'm never going to get married. It's the last thing I want to do. Aren't we sensible? And so on and so on. Yeah. And then there's quite a lot of adventures involving a rather botched duel. And, Marianne's mother has a serious illness and she has to go back to Bristol. I wanted to have quite a few things that would split them up to increase the tension. And well, everyone can guess what the ending will be, but it's how you get there, isn't it, in a romance?
I love a friends to lovers one where neither one of them can say how they really feel because they've already so clearly established that that's not what they're doing, and the risk is so high, the risk of losing their friendship is so huge. And you've got two characters with very heavy arcs too, which is always fun when they have to grow so much to get to their happy ever after. So awesome.
Thank you.
Is this the last book in the series, or is there another one?
No, it's the last book. Yes.
And is this a Sweet Dreams book?
It is. Yes.
This was part of the Sweet Dreams line. So that means that anything beyond kissing stays behind a bedroom door.
It is closed door. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I love that as a Dragonblade reader, you can pick whichever level of heat you want, right? In that moment. So we're trying to make that very clear to readers.
And you're going to have little flags, aren't you? To go
we've started putting flags on the new covers. We've always put it in the blurbs, or tried to put it in the blurbs, but we started putting flags on the covers so that when you look at the book, you can get a very clear idea of what the heat level is, so you can choose where you want to be.
I think that's great because everyone likes different things.
And different things at different times too.
Exactly.
I think we're not just one kind of reader. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I read anything. But when it comes to writing, I like to write the closed door. I don't know what it is. I think maybe, what if my mother reads it, But I will read anything.
And everybody has to pick the level of heat that they're comfortable with. I think if you force yourself to do something that you're not comfortable with, I think it shows on the page. So, there's an advantage to staying in the lane that feels right to you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Awesome. Well, since we're talking about writing anyway, why don't we expand a little bit on that, and can we talk a little bit about any writing rituals you may have, anything you do before you start a new book, or how you get yourself in the place that you need to be to write every day, assuming that you write every day?
Well, I've started doing an online thing. Writers across the world Zoom in for 1 hour.
Oh, Zoom sprints, that's cool.
Yes, so 4 times a day you can have the possibility of that, so it copes with all the time zones around the planet. Because I think I'm quite a rule follower, and so if I have to get to my computer by 8, even if it's in my dressing gown and I'm going to have the camera off, I see all of other faces, and we toast each other with cups of tea, and then we start. And you have a motivating quote and so on. So you actually get 50 minutes out of your hour that are just continual writing. And they have 2 rules. You have to either write or just think. You can't do anything else. So you can't do your emails or anything. And it's just being accountable. And I found that helps my motivation a lot. I've been starting a new book at the moment, a contemporary romance. And it really helped me just get over that initial thing of starting to put the words on the paper. I don't know if anyone else writes with other people in that way.
Do either of you Zoom?
I have there's a new romance only bookstore that opened up about 20 from my house, and every other Sunday they have a writers group get together there. And I've never with people before, but I have started going to that, and we do sprints where they'll just kind of set a time for 20 minutes. You have to just write, and that's been really interesting for me because none of the other people there write historical romance, and they're all significantly younger than me, and it's really interesting to hear what they're into. It's
Mhm.
very different, and it's really a lot of fun. But most of the time I'm sitting in my house at my little desk, just plugging away. So
Yeah.
Yeah, same. I work a full-time job outside of writing, so that keeps me busy till about 7 to 5:30. So usually around 7 o'clock, I'll just close up in my office till about 10 o'clock and work on writing. I did find that working in sprints is what's best for me. And
Yeah.
I also found that I apparently have a very short attention span because after a lot of trial and error, my sprints are 10 minutes long. I'll do a 10
Oh,
minute
wow.
sprint, take a
Mhm.
couple minutes rest to like check an email or check,
Mhm.
the internet, whatever, and then go back into another 10-minute sprint. Yeah. I tried, I did an awesome class that Emily put on, Emily
Uh-huh.
Murdoch, on writing faster and things like that. And one of her exercises was to try out different times of sprints to see
Mhm.
what your sweet spot was. An hour was like, forget it. There was no way I was writing an hour straight. 30 minutes was a haul. And then even like, then I did like 20, 15, 10, and it was like 10 minutes was his sweet spot. So I was like, okay, that's it. It's odd, but it's what works. So
But it's yours. And I think
yeah.
I think that that's so important, is figuring out what is yours. I know that so many people write early in the morning. I fall asleep at the keyboard. I can't,
Mhm.
can't
Yes.
do it. So you have to figure out what is, like what is your space.
Yes.
Mhm.
Do you I know Emily does just pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of plotting before she starts writing. Do any of the rest of you do heavy plotting ahead of time, or do you mostly just fly by the seat of your pants?
I work off of a really loose outline. I'll write out a summary and I'll create a really loose outline chapter by chapter for that, and then I'll write off of that. But I am not a heavy plotter at all.
What about you, Jenny?
I do quite a bit of plotting, but I'm not afraid to just ignore it once I get going, because like all of you, I'm sure I find the characters take over a bit, or I just think of something better as I'm going along, and something that seems a bit more reasonable. But I do like to have a plan, even if I don't follow it.
What about you, Carol?
I generally, I know where I'm starting and I know where I'm going to end up. And I often have some disjointed scenes floating around in my head that I know I have to work in there somewhere. But mostly it's getting from what I know at the beginning to where I want to be at the end, and then seeing how I get there. So I'm
Do you
more of
write in a linear?
do I what?
Do you write in a linener fashion, or do you
I
write the
do.
scenes that you know?
I do, and I find that's a really good motivator when I have a scene that I really want to write, but I
Yeah.
won't let myself write it until I get there. So
That makes sense. Does anybody else write out of order, or do you all write in a linear? You write out of order?
I will write out of
most
order.
fascinating.
If I get stuck on something and I have a scene in my head that I know is coming up in the future and that I know is going to be in the book, I will go ahead and write that scene. And just I write in Scrivener, which helps a lot because it you can kind of,
Move
piece things
things.
together and really easily, much easier than when I used to write in Word. So I will, it doesn't happen often, but I will write out of line if it happens, it will happen. But
I have to say, I think I'm writing in order, but then sometimes at the end of the book, I go, oh, well, no, this really has to be switched around.
Yes, I tend to write in order because for me it's like and then and then and then. I just think of stories like that. However, once I get about halfway through the book, I have to sort of dot back a bit, because you realise, don't you, that, oh, that should have been foreshadowed. And before I forget that, I better go back. So you search for the word and you go back to chapter 3 or whatever, put something in. And while you're there, you think, hang on, this is a fault in the plot. There's something else that I have said his hair was a different color or something. So as you get further on in the book, it does get a bit complicated, doesn't it? Because you're constantly backwards and forwards. Yeah. But I couldn't write, I don't think I could write the end before the beginning. I know some people do, and very successfully, but I'd find that too much.
Yeah, I don't think I can write the end first either.
No, I think there's something about learning the characters too as you go through the book, because in the beginning you have an idea of who they're going to be, but by 3/4 of the way through, you actually really start to know them and know how they would react to things. And sometimes it's not the same as the way you made them react in the beginning of the book. So
that's right. Yes.
Stretches.
Can I just ask, does anyone else dictate? Because I do a lot of dictating in the beginning of the book, mainly because I'm so slow at typing. So I just speak the action, and I find that helps the dialogue because it makes it a bit more natural. But of course, it leaves me with an awful lot of tidying up and so on, because dictation isn't always very good at punctuating and so on. Anyone else do dictation?
I don't. I have friends that do, and some that really like it, and some find it, like you mentioned, a lot of cleanup and things like that they have to do. Yeah. So they kind of find it more work than if they just, type to begin with. But I haven't tried it. I've thought about it, but I haven't had a chance to try it out.
I have tried it, but it doesn't work for me. I think I actually think faster and more clearly if I'm typing than if I'm talking. So
yeah, and I need to see it in front of me too. I need to watch the words move across the screen. Alexa Aston does a lot of now. All my devices are going to start talking. There we go. She's not sure how to help me with that. But I know she dictates quite a lot, and she dictates while she walks. And I always love the efficiency of that. The idea that you could work on your book while you're walking in the morning, or take a break in the afternoon to clear your head and dictate. I think that's a lovely idea.
Well, I've certainly done some scenes in the park, because I just think, especially in the summer, last summer, I'll just go into the park and took my phone to carry on, and got some very funny looks from people in the park.
I can imagine.
And then it was then that I was glad it was just Sweet Dreams and not something else.
People looking over your shoulder as well. So. I just think that when you try to work on an airplane, it's it's just so close,
Yes.
So do any of you have things that you have to do before you start writing coffee or tea, or do you reread what you wrote before, or do you have a certain ritual or pattern you go through before you start?
I kind of start stuttering, I'll sit down and I'll reread a little, or I'll do something, look at the Facebook stuff, and then I'll start writing. And then I always, right around 11, I take a break, leave the house, go get a coffee of some kind and bring it back. And then once I have that cup of coffee there, then I can really get started. But I think I need that separation. I need to go out, clear my head, and come back.
Yeah, and that little bit of messing around time too. I think it's hard to explain why that's important, but it is. You have to get it out of your head.
I always have a drink, usually water, because I'm usually writing at night. So if I had coffee, I'd never sleep. So it's usually water. But I have a playlist that I set up for each book that I write. So I listen to that while I'm writing that particular book. And that's the only time I listen to that playlist, is when I'm writing the book.
Yeah, what a great way to get your head right back in the story.
Yes. Yeah. And I do usually read through the last couple of pages I wrote before I start writing for the day, just to jump right in where I left off.
Yeah, I do that. I always look back over the last thing that I've done the day before and just hook into it, and then sometimes mess about with it a bit, and then I'm ready to go on. But I'm interested, you can listen to a playlist. Honestly, I've had my career in music teaching. I cannot listen to music when I'm writing, because all I'm doing is thinking, that's an interesting chord. Oh, I wonder why the tune's going like that. That's not very well performed, is it? I'm just far too critical. And I'd love to be able go back to that lovely state where you can just relax and listen to music, but it's still too close to me. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to being able to not analyze music, just enjoy it.
Yes, if I had that background, I would probably have the same issue.
Yes.
And it has
Does
to be
your
something that
playlist-
doesn't make you sing. So
Mm.
Does your playlist have words? Or is it just music? Because if it was words,
There's a mix. Some have words and some don't.
Mm.
well, ladies, it's been a treat to talk to you today. It's really interesting to hear how everybody works through their books. I love learning about how you all get to the same kind of place in completely different ways. So I think that that's really interesting, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and also being so open to share with us about that. So I'm going to make sure I put the links to all the books in the comments so you can grab them if you haven't gotten them already. I'm going to say the same thing I say every week because it's true every week. Dragonblade books are the best deal on pre-order and release. So you want to grab them right away. If you don't get them while they're still on their pre-order price, you can read them in Kindle Unlimited. So which is how I read almost everything nowadays. Ladies, thanks again for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you. Thanks.